even though we started the whole thing over here, like we played here before the Sex Pistols were even sort of, thought of.
Yeah.
And now we've all...
In February 1980, the world of rock music was shaken by the sudden death of Bon Scott, the powerful and wild frontman of AC/DC. The official story seemed simple at first. After a night of heavy drinking in London, Bon was said to have passed out in a small car and never woke up. The cause of death was listed as acute alcohol poisoning. For many people, that explanation fit the image they already had of him. Bon was known for his loud voice, rebellious spirit, and hard-partying lifestyle. He sang about danger, freedom, and living fast. So when news spread that he had died after drinking too much, many fans sadly accepted it as the tragic end of a reckless rock star. But as the years passed, questions began to grow. Some details about that night did not seem clear. Timelines did not fully match. People who were reportedly with him gave different versions of events. There were also claims that important hours were missing from the official account. The car in which he was found, a small Renault parked in South London, became part of rock history. Yet what truly happened inside that vehicle during those final hours remains debated. To understand why so many people still question the story, it is important to look not only at that night, but also at the life Bon lived before it. His journey from a quiet childhood to global fame was filled with struggle, rebellion, music, and risk. That life shaped the man he became, and it may also hold clues to the mystery of his final hours. Bon Scott was born Ronald Belford Scott on July 9, 1946, in Forfar, a small town in Scotland. His parents had already suffered the pain of losing a child before he was born, so his arrival brought deep joy to the family. In the early 1950s, like many British families after World War II, the Scotts faced economic hardship. Jobs were limited, and life felt uncertain. Seeking better opportunities, they moved to Australia under a government program that offered low-cost travel to British families willing to start fresh overseas. Bon was still a young child when they arrived in Melbourne, and later the family settled in Fremantle, a port city in Western Australia. Growing up in Australia was not always easy for him. He had a strong Scottish accent, and other children sometimes bully him for it. Instead of becoming quiet or withdrawn, Bon developed a tough personality. He refused to change who he was to please others. That stubborn spirit would later become part of his stage presence. As a teenager, he discovered music and joined local bands. He learned to play drums and later focused on singing. At the same time, he also began getting into trouble. He spent time with street gangs and had several run-ins with the police. Eventually, he was sent to a juvenile detention center for a period. The experience was harsh, but it did not break him. Instead, it strengthened his belief that he would escape ordinary life through music. After his release, he worked different jobs while continuing to perform in small bands. He had a powerful voice and natural confidence on stage. Slowly, he built a name for himself in the local music scene. Those early years shaped him into someone who lived intensely and without fear, a man who seemed ready to risk everything for success. By the early 1970s, Bon's path crossed with the young brothers, Angus and Malcolm, who were forming a new hard rock band that would become AC/DC. Bon joined as their lead singer in 1974, and the group quickly developed a raw, energetic sound. They were loud, simple, and powerful. Bon's gritty voice matched the heavy guitar riffs perfectly. He wrote lyrics that were bold, funny, and sometimes shocking. Songs like Highway to Hell captured the spirit of freedom and rebellion that many young fans connected with. As the band's popularity grew, so did their lifestyle. Touring was intense. Long nights, alcohol, and constant travel became normal. Rock culture at the time often celebrated excess. Drinking heavily was almost expected. Bon was known to enjoy alcohol, and stories of wild nights followed the band wherever they went. Still, those who knew him also described him as smart, thoughtful, and even gentle in private moments. He was not just a reckless party figure. He cared deeply about music and about his friends. In early 1980, AC/DC was on the edge of massive global success. Highway to Hell had already made them stars in many countries. They were preparing to work on what would later become the album Back in Black. No one imagined that Bon would not live to see its release. On the night of February 18, 1980, Bon reportedly went out drinking with a friend in London. According to the official version, he became heavily intoxicated and could not return home. He was placed in the passenger seat of a parked car to sleep it off. The next morning, he was found unresponsive. Emergency services were called, but he was pronounced dead soon after. The cause was listed as death by misadventure due to alcohol poisoning. However, over the years, many fans and researchers began pointing out details that seemed unclear. Some questioned why he was left alone in a car instead of being taken inside somewhere safe. Others wondered about the exact timeline. Reports about how much he drank and where he went that evening sometimes differed. There were also questions about whether he may have choked while sleeping, which can happen if someone is deeply intoxicated and lying in a certain position. Medical experts later explained that severe alcohol poisoning can slow breathing and lead to death, especially if the person vomits and cannot wake up. Yet critics argue that the investigation into his death was brief and did not explore every possible angle. In 1980, rock stars dying from drugs or alcohol was sadly not uncommon, and some believe authorities may have accepted the simplest explanation too quickly. There is no strong public evidence of foul play, but the lack of detailed answers has allowed rumors to grow. Some believe there were more people involved that night than officially stated. Others suggest there may have been missed warning signs. The truth is that memories fade, and over 4 decades have passed. Many key witnesses have either changed their stories or are no longer alive. Without clear records, certainty becomes difficult. What remains is a mixture of documented facts and ongoing speculation. After Bon's death, AC/DC faced a painful decision. They considered ending the band entirely. In the end, they chose to continue, believing Bon would have wanted them to move forward. They hired Brian Johnson as their new singer and released Back in Black later that year. The album became one of the best-selling records of all time and was dedicated to Bon's memory. His influence remained strong in the band's identity. Fans still debate what his future might have looked like if he had survived. Would he have continued with the band for decades? Would his lifestyle have changed? These questions can never be answered. What can be said is that Bon Scott left a powerful mark on rock history. His voice, personality, and lyrics helped shape one of the biggest bands in the world. At the same time, his death serves as a reminder of the dangers of excessive drinking and the risks of being left alone in a vulnerable state. Whether one accepts the official story completely or still has doubts, the sadness of that night remains real. A talented musician died at only 33 years old. The mystery surrounding his final hours continues to interest fans, but perhaps the more important legacy is the music he created and the energy he brought to the stage. In the end, the story of that February night is not just about unanswered questions. It is about a life lived loudly, imperfectly, and passionately, and about how quickly even the brightest flames can burn out. In the years since that cold February morning, the debate about what truly happened to Bon Scott has not faded. Instead, it has grown stronger with each new generation of fans discovering his music. Some writers and researchers have gone back to original reports, interviews, and coroner statements, trying to piece together a clearer timeline of his final hours. According to the commonly accepted account, Bon had been out drinking in London with a friend on the evening of February 18, 1980. They visited several clubs and bars, and as the night went on, Bon reportedly became extremely intoxicated. Because he was unable to stand or speak clearly, his friend decided not to take him inside his own home, but instead left him in the passenger seat of a parked Renault 5 to sleep. The temperature that night was cold, and Bon was said to be wrapped in a coat. When his friend returned the next morning, he found Bon still slumped in the seat and unresponsive. He was taken to the hospital, but doctors declared him dead. The cause was recorded as acute alcohol poisoning and death by misadventure. On paper, the sequence of events seems direct and tragic, but simple. Yet critics point out that heavy drinkers often build tolerance, and while alcohol poisoning is possible, some question whether the amount reportedly consumed would have been enough to cause death so quickly. Others ask why no effort was made to place him in a recovery position or to check on him during the night. Small decisions can have large consequences, and in this case, a single choice may have meant the difference between life and death. Another layer of uncertainty comes from the way information was shared in the days following his passing. Media reports at the time were not always consistent. Some early articles suggested different locations or slightly different timelines. In an era before instant digital records, stories often changed as they were retold. Friends, band members, and witnesses were in shock, and shock can affect memory. Over time, some accounts were corrected, while others became part of rock legend. Because AC/DC was rising quickly in fame, public interest in the story was intense. Fans wanted details, but the family also wanted privacy. The coroner's report did not suggest violence or outside interference, which led authorities to close the case without deeper criminal investigation. For many observers, that was enough. However, others believe that celebrity deaths sometimes receive faster conclusions because officials assume risky behavior is the obvious cause. It is important to note that no strong evidence has ever been presented publicly to prove foul play. Most medical experts agree that severe alcohol intoxication alone can stop breathing, especially if the person vomits and is unable to wake up. Still, the unanswered small questions continue to create doubt for some people. The fact that certain individuals connected to that night later avoided public interviews or gave short answers has added to speculation, even if there may be simple personal reasons for their silence. Beyond the technical details, the emotional impact of Bond's death was enormous. Band members were devastated. Angus and Malcolm Young had built their musical vision around his voice and personality. For them, he was not just a singer but a brother in spirit. There were serious discussions about ending the band completely. At only 33 years old, Bond seemed to be just reaching the peak of his career. Highway to Hell had pushed them into international success, especially in the United States. Many believe the pressure of that growing fame also increased the intensity of touring and partying. Life on the road in the late 1970s was demanding. Long flights, late-night performances, and constant attention from fans created stress. Alcohol was often used to relax or celebrate after shows. While Bond had always enjoyed drinking, some reports suggest that his consumption increased during that period. Friends later described him as both strong and vulnerable, someone who could handle a crowd of thousands, but sometimes struggled with exhaustion and personal uncertainty. These human aspects are important because they show that the mystery of his death is not only about missing hours or medical terms. It is also about the fragile balance between fame and health. When a person is constantly pushed to perform, sleep patterns change and decision-making can become less careful. Even without any conspiracy, a combination of fatigue, alcohol, and cold weather can become deadly. In the decades since, Bon Scott's legacy has only grown stronger. Every year, fans visit his gravesite in Fremantle, Australia, leaving flowers, notes, and guitar picks. Statues have been built in his honor, and his name remains closely connected with the early identity of AC/DC. When Back in Black was released later in 1980 with new singer Brian Johnson, it became one of the highest-selling albums in history. Many fans see it as both a tribute and a continuation of Bond's spirit. His lyrics, filled with humor and bold confidence, still influence rock music today. The ongoing discussion about his final night reflects how deeply people care about him. When a beloved artist dies suddenly, especially at a young age, fans search for meaning. They want to understand every detail because it feels wrong that someone so alive could be gone so quickly. Whether the official explanation tells the full story or not, one fact is clear. Bon Scott lived intensely and left a powerful mark in a short time. The questions surrounding that February night may never be fully answered, but his voice continues to echo through speakers around the world. In the end, the mystery keeps his story alive, but it is the music that keeps his spirit alive. As the years passed, writers, journalists, and devoted fans continued to re-examine the final hours of Bon Scott, hoping that a clearer picture might emerge. Some focused on the medical details of alcohol poisoning, trying to understand exactly how it affects the human body. Doctors explained that when a person consumes a very large amount of alcohol in a short time, the central nervous system slows down. Breathing can become shallow. the gag reflex can weaken, and the body may lose its ability to wake itself from unconsciousness. If the person vomits while lying on their back or side in the wrong position, choking can occur silently. In cold weather, the risk increases because alcohol also lowers body temperature and reduces awareness. Even experienced drinkers are not immune. Tolerance does not fully protect the body from toxic levels of alcohol in the bloodstream. Some experts who reviewed the public information later stated that the official cause of death was medically possible and consistent with known cases. However, critics argue that possible does not always mean fully explained. They point out that exact blood alcohol levels were not widely publicized at the time, and the public relied mostly on summarized reports rather than detailed medical records. This gap between official documentation and public understanding created space for theories. Without clear and transparent medical data available to fans, people filled in the blanks with their own ideas. Over time, those ideas hardened into long-lasting doubts. Another issue often discussed is the social atmosphere of rock culture in the late 1970s. During that era, heavy drinking was not just common. It was often celebrated. Many musicians built their image around excess, and fans expected wild stories. For a band like AC/DC, whose music was loud, energetic, and rebellious, the lifestyle seemed to match the sound. Yet behind the image, the reality could be exhausting. Touring schedules were demanding, interviews were constant, and expectations kept rising. Fame can create isolation. Even when surrounded by people, artists can feel alone. Some friends later described Bon as someone who carried both joy and quiet stress. He loved performing and connecting with audiences, but he also dealt with personal pressures, including relationship struggles and the weight of leading a band that was rapidly growing in popularity. In such conditions, alcohol can become more than a party tool. It can turn into a coping mechanism. This does not suggest conspiracy, but it does suggest vulnerability. When someone is extremely tired and emotionally stretched, their body and judgment are less resilient. A decision that might seem small, like choosing to let someone sleep it off, can become tragic under the wrong